He thought beachfront glass made him a king. He thought a tailored blazer and a penthouse view turned cruelty into standards. When Trent Harlow yanked the card out from under the old woman, when he watched her tumble backwards onto polished marble and laughed about slip and fall insurance, he truly believed no one on the Florida coast would ever dare stand against him. He didn't see the dusty black pickup easing into the loading bay across the street. He didn't see the man in the faded military ball cap behind the wheel, or the scarred German shepherd sitting upright in the passenger seat, amber eyes locked on the lobby doors like he was waiting for a signal only he could hear. He didn't see the moment his entire world began to tilt. The August heat in Clearwater Beach was the kind that clung to you. It rose off the Gulf like a wet blanket, turning the air into something you didn't just breathe, but waded through. The boardwalk shimmered with mirages. Tourists moved slow and sticky under cheap straw hats, and even the gulls seemed half-hearted in their screeching. Ethan Cole didn't mind. Compared to the kind of heat he'd marched through overseas, desert heat that baked you from the inside out, this was just humidity and salt, a nuisance, an old acquaintance. He parked the pickup in the shade of a scraggly palm, cut the engine, and let the silence settle. For a long beat, he just sat there. His reflection stared back at him in the windshield. Early 40s, close-cropped dark hair threaded with gray at the temples, jaw rough with 2 days' stubble, a pale scar slashing from his left eyebrow down toward his cheek. A souvenir from a night he tried very hard not to remember. The VA called him retired. The news called him a decorated veteran. The nightmares called him other things. Beside him, Rex shifted. The dog was all muscle and focus, a massive German shepherd with a black saddle, sable legs, and a face that looked like it had been designed by someone who liked sharp lines and sharper eyes. One ear had a little notch missing from an old bite, and a thin white scar tracked through the fur along his shoulder. Unlike the tourists, Rex wasn't wilting in the heat. His tongue lolled for a second, then disappeared as his mouth closed again. The dog's gaze returned to the glass tower across the street, the Azure Palms residences, 12 stories of mirrored ocean views and imported stone. Ethan followed his stare. "Yeah, I see it," he said quietly. His voice had a gravel edge, the drawl of someone who'd grown up in Georgia and then had most of the softness trained out of him. "We'll walk the beach after I talk to the building manager. Then you can chase waves instead of trouble. Deal?" Rex flicked an ear at the word manager, as if he'd heard that tone before. Ethan smiled despite himself. "Stay," he said, clipping the command with years of ingrained discipline. "Guard the truck." Rex's body settled, but his eyes didn't. They tracked Ethan's every move as he swung out of the cab, adjusted his faded navy ball cap, and crossed the street. He felt naked without gear. No plate carrier, no rifle, no comms. Just jeans, boots that had seen too many miles, and a plain navy t-shirt that clung to his shoulders in the damp air. But the walk. The walk never changed. Long, efficient strides. Weight balanced over the balls of his feet. Head on a swivel without looking like it. Old habits. The Azure Palms towered above him, all tinted glass and white concrete, a monument to money and the people who believed palm trees and private elevators meant something permanent. A valet in a white shirt and blue vest opened the brass-trimmed glass door with a practiced smile. "Sir, residents only unless—" "I'm here to see management," Ethan said, tone polite, but leaving no room for the word no. "About an inspection?" The valet's eyes flicked to the ball cap, to the scar, to the posture that didn't match tourist. He stepped back. "Yes, sir. Manager's in the lobby." The air inside was polar opposite the street. Ice cold, scented with lemon oil and something floral that had never grown in Florida soil. The floor was polished Calicotta marble, white veins laced through smoky gray, so shiny it turned the entire lobby into a mirror. At the center of it all, under a cascading chandelier, stood Trent Harlow. Trent was in his mid-30s and looked like a real estate brochure had come to life. Perfect tan that never peeled, golf-toned forearms, hair styled in an artful wave that probably cost more than most families' utilities. His blazer was cream linen, his loafers caramel leather with no socks, his smile a precise thing he could switch on and off. Right now, it was off. Right now, his lips were curled into an expression that lived somewhere between disgust and amusement. The target of that expression was a small woman in a maintenance polo and gray slacks. Lorraine Miller was 68 years old. The building ID badge on her chest said housekeeping, but the lines on her hands and the stiffness in her knees said life. Her hair was a soft cloud of silver pulled into a bun, wisps escaping at the temples where sweat had pasted them to her skin. The uniform was clean, pressed, but old. Darker spots on her sleeves said she'd been scrubbing something with too much bleach and not enough ventilation. Her cleaning cart sat at the base of the elevator bank, bottles lined up like soldiers, a yellow "Caution, Wet Floor" sign folded on the lower rack. On top of the cart, wrapped in a cheap pink plastic tablecloth, sat a small, lopsided cake box. Lorraine's hand reached out toward it, fingers trembling. Trent's hand got there first. He plucked the box off the cart like it was contaminated. "This," he said, voice pitched just loud enough to carry across the marble, "is not permitted." Lorraine flinched at the volume. She wasn't used to being the center of the lobby. She was used to moving in the background, disappearing into stairwells and service halls. "Mr. Harlow, it's just—" Her southern lilt was soft, the kind that smoothed its way around words. "It's my granddaughter's birthday. She lives on the 10th floor in 1003B with my daughter. I'm on my way up to clean the fitness center anyway," and Trent held up a splayed finger manicure hand. "I don't care if it's for the Pope," he said. "Outside food is not allowed through the main lobby. Residents pay for cleanliness, for image, not for—" He eyed the box like it contained mold. "Grocery store sheet cakes with rainbow frosting." Ethan could have turned around. It was none of his business. He had come to talk about something else entirely. A collapsed balcony railing on the 7th floor that he'd seen in a news clip, the kind of neglect that turned into headlines with words like tragedy and families mourn. He could have found another day, another way. Filed a complaint. Sent an email. But he watched the lines tighten around Lorraine's eyes when Trent mocked her. He watched her clutch the strap of her cart like a lifeline. He watched how the other people in the lobby, real estate agent with a folder, young couple in gym clothes, an older man in boat shoes, looked anywhere but at her, trying to make her invisible so they wouldn't have to pick a side. Ethan's jaw shifted. His weight changed on his feet. His attention, which had been diffuse and assessing, narrowed to a sharp point on the man in the linen blazer. Trent turned the cake box sideways, inspecting it like it might leak. There was a child's handwriting on the lid in the purple marker. "Happy 8th B-Day, Maddie," with little hearts drawn around it. He smirked. "You bring this up to the Sky Lounge," he said, "and it goes on Instagram, and suddenly every housekeeper with a grandchild thinks the lobby is a picnic area. Next thing you know, we have ants, roaches, God knows what. And do you know who the condo board blames?" Lorraine swallowed. "Sir, I wasn't going to the Sky Lounge. I was just—" "You were just," Trent mimicked in a high, trembling voice, "going to break the rules." He reached down with his other hand and yanked the cleaning cart backward. It happened faster than Lorraine's tired muscles could respond. 1 second, she was leaning slightly on the cart for balance. The next, the support was gone. Her feet slipped on the edge of the freshly mopped strip of marble she'd just cleaned. The mop head, still damp, slid across the stone. Lorraine's heel hit the wet patch. Her legs went out from under her. Her arms flailed, fingers grasping for the cart handle that wasn't there. She went down hard. The back of her head smacked into the marble with a sound that echoed like someone dropping a full bottle. The nearby guests gasped. The "Caution, Wet Floor" sign jolted off the cart and clattered to the ground beside her. Yellow plastic legs splayed. The cake box flew. It arced in the air, flipped, and burst open when it hit the floor. The small chocolate cake, frosted with uneven care and decorated with 8 crooked little candles already stuck into the top, splattered across the marble, smearing frosting in a sad rainbow skid. For a moment, everything froze. Lorraine lay stunned on the ground, blinking up at the chandelier. A thin line of blood appeared where the edge of her scalp had kissed stone. Her breath came in short, panicked little bursts. Trent looked down. Then he laughed. It wasn't the nervous chuckle of someone shocked. It was a real laugh, amused, annoyed, even a little pleased with himself. "Well," he said, stepping around a smear of frosting, "if you wanted to file for workers' comp, you could have been more creative." The couple in gym clothes glanced at each other. The older man cleared his throat. The concierge behind the marble desk stared at the monitors a little too intently, pretending not to see. Trent snapped his fingers. "Luis!" A security guard in a navy blazer and a too-tight tie broke away from the wall. He was big in the way that came from bulk, not conditioning. His name tag read Luis Perez. His eyes flicked from the manager to the fallen woman, then to the security camera domes in the ceiling. "Yes, sir." "Escort Mrs. Miller out the service entrance," Trent said. "And make sure she leaves her badge. She's done. I won't have liability lying on my lobby floor." Lorraine's head jerked. "Mr. Harlow, I've been here 12 years. I clean your office." "You used to," Trent said. "You're a hazard now. You're slow, you're careless, and you bring this." He nudged the ruined cake with the toe of his shoe, smearing frosting further. "Into my lobby." Luis hesitated. He wasn't a bad man. He just had a mortgage, 2 kids, and a boss who could make his life hell. "Sir," he tried, "she hit her head. Maybe we should call—" Trent's smile reappeared, wolfish and cold. "We'll call someone," he said, "but not the paramedics." He reached into his blazer pocket, pulled out his phone, and began tapping in a number. "Mr. Wyatt?" he said, when the line picked up. "Yes, John. Hi. I'm in the lobby with your wife's mother. She seems to have taken a fall on purpose. I'm afraid she can't continue working here. I wanted you to hear it from me first. I'll have her brought out to the alley so you can pick her up." "Yes, of course. I know you'll handle it." He hung up, slipped the phone away, and nodded at Luis. "Move her." Luis knelt, sliding an arm under Lorraine's shoulders. She tried to sit up on her own. The world tilted, vision going gray at the edges. Her fingertips brushed through smeared frosting and bumped into a fallen candle. She closed her hand around the tiny wax stick like it was a lifeline. "Please," she whispered, cheeks burning with humiliation. "My shift isn't— I've still got 3 floors to do. I need the hours." Trent's eyes hardened. "You need to understand your place," he said. "You are not a resident. You are not a guest. You are staff. And when staff become more trouble than they're worth, staff get replaced." He stepped closer, towering over her as Luis began to lift. "You should have retired years ago, Mrs. Miller. People like you. You outstay your usefulness, and then you expect the rest of us to pick up the slack." His hand came down, fast and sharp, not a punch. That would leave a bruise. Cameras caught bruises. But a quick snapping slap across the back of her hand where it clutched the candle, knuckles white. The crack of skin on skin echoed off the marble. The candle popped out of her grasp, bounced twice, and rolled, leaving a tiny line of purple wax in its wake. Lorraine sucked in a breath, more from shock than pain, and clutched her stinging hand to her chest. "Drop the trash," Trent said. "You don't get to take anything from here. Not your badge, not your dignity, and definitely not your granddaughter's pity party mess." That was as far as he got, because someone else had started moving the second he raised his hand. From the truck across the street, Rex had watched the humans behind the glass with a predator's stillness. Dogs didn't care about marble or branding. They cared about tone, posture, scent. He watched the old woman fall. He watched the man in the cream blazer laugh. He heard the rhythm of his handler's heart change, even from across asphalt and through glass. The command Ethan had thrown over his shoulder, "Stay, guard the truck," was iron. Rex wouldn't break it for just anything. But there were rules humans didn't understand, rules older than leashes and training collars. When the slap cracked through the lobby, something primal flicked on in the dog's chest. Ethan was already crossing the street. He didn't remember making the decision to go. One moment he was leaning against the fender, jaw clenched, telling himself this wasn't his fight. The next, he was halfway across the crosswalk, boots hitting the white paint in steady, ground-eating strides. He didn't break into a sprint. Sprinting spooked crowds. Sprinting telegraphed panic. He walked. But every line of his body said, "Collision incoming." The valet saw him coming and stepped out of the way without being told. Ethan hit the revolving door, shoved it harder than necessary, and stepped into the blast of conditioned air like a weather front. Sound changed in here. Outside was waves and traffic. Inside was piano jazz from hidden speakers and the soft buzz of money trying not to look vulgar. Over all of it, he heard Lorraine's ragged breathing. "Hey," Ethan said. Just one syllable, but it was enough to pull every eye in the lobby toward him. Trent turned, irritation already on his tongue. "If you're here about a unit viewing, talk to—" "Back up," Ethan said. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. There was a tone some men learned that cut through noise simply because it had been tempered in places where not listening got you killed. Luis froze, halfway through lifting Lorraine. Trent blinked. "Excuse me? You're standing over a woman who just hit her head on marble," Ethan said, closing the distance in 4 long steps. "You're crowding her. Your security is manhandling her. You just struck her hand. So yeah, I said back, up." He stepped between Trent and Lorraine in a movement so smooth and controlled, it almost looked choreographed. His boots planted on either side of the smeared cake, like he was taking a position in mud instead of buttercream. Up close, Trent registered the details, the scar, the eyes that tracked everything at once, the way his shoulders stayed relaxed while his center of gravity shifted forward half an inch, ready for something. "Who the hell are you?" Trent demanded, snapping his fingers in Ethan's face as if ordering a waiter. "This is private property. You don't get to stomp in here and disrupt." Ethan caught the pointing hand. Not roughly, not enough to be called assault on camera, just enough to arrest its movement in midair. His fingers wrapped around Trent's wrist. He squeezed once, a very precise amount of pressure that made the younger man's knees soften. "Name's Ethan Cole," he said. "I don't live here. I'm not a guest. I don't own a penthouse. But I've buried men so you could stand in an air-conditioned lobby and pretend a job title makes you untouchable. So here's how this is going to go." Every word was quiet. Every word landed like a weight dropped on glass. "You're going to step back 3 feet. Your guard is going to let her sit up slowly. Then we are going to ask if she wants an ambulance, not decide for her. You don't touch her again." Trent tried to jerk his hand back. Ethan let him go. He didn't need to hold on. The point had been made. "This woman is an employee," Trent said, rubbing his wrist, the flush on his cheeks deepening from pink to red. "Correction. Former employee. She staged a fall in my lobby. That's fraud. I have every right to remove her." Lorraine found her voice. "I didn't stage anything," she said. Her words wobbled, but there was iron underneath. "You pulled the cart out from under me. I lost my footing." "We have cameras," Trent snapped. "So do I," said a new voice. Everyone turned. The concierge, who had been staring so intently at the monitors, now stood with a phone in his hand. Its camera light was on. So were 6 others in the lobby, residents and guests who had decided that, actually, they did want to look at what was happening. Trent's eyes flicked from one glowing screen to another. Ethan saw the moment the manager realized this wasn't one of those times you could bully someone in the shadows. The door to the street swung open again. This time, Rex came through it. Ethan hadn't called him. The dog had waited until the revolving door slowed, then pushed his massive head against the glass, just enough to slip through with a low whoosh. The valet, smart enough to know the difference between a pet and whatever this was, didn't try to stop him. Rex patted onto the marble, nails clicking, nose flaring as he zeroed in on his handler. His gaze flicked once to Lorraine on the ground, took in the blood scent, the stress pheromones, and the lingering echo of anger rolling off Trent. The dog's lips peeled back just enough to show a neat row of white teeth. "Rex, heel," Ethan said. The dog flowed to his side, shoulder pressed against Ethan's leg, head up, body coiled. "This is outrageous," Trent sputtered. "Security, get them out. Your guard puts hands on me or the dog. I will consider it a hostile action," Ethan said, voice still completely calm. "And I promise you, I know a lot more about how to put someone on the ground without leaving a mark than your guy in the blazer." Luis shuffled back half a step, Adam's apple bobbing. Somewhere in the background, a phone rang, shrill and out of place. The concierge glanced at the caller ID, then at Trent. "It's Mr. Navarro," he said, "from the ownership company." Trent straightened his blazer. "Put him through to my office," he said. "Tell him I've had to deal with a disturbance." "He's already on the line," the concierge said, voice going thinner. "He's been watching the security feed from the street camera. He wants to talk to you. Now." Silence slid over the lobby. Trent swallowed. "I'll take it in my—" "He said now," the concierge repeated. They moved Lorraine to a bench along the wall. Ethan insisted on sitting her up slowly. One hand braced gently between her shoulder blades, the other hovering near her elbow. He checked her pupils with a small flashlight from his pocket, asked her orientation questions, watched her eyes track his finger. "Headache?" he asked. "A little," she admitted. "But I've had worse from trying to reach under ovens." He smiled at that. "You nauseous, vision blurry?" "Everything's a little swimmy," she conceded. "We're calling paramedics," he said. "That's not optional." "I can't afford—" "You can't afford not to," Ethan countered. "Don't worry about the bill right now." The concierge had already dialed. When the operator asked what the emergency was, he didn't mention fraud. He mentioned fall and head injury and age. Rex stationed himself with his broad head, near Lorraine's knee, body between her and the rest of the lobby. Anyone who drifted too close found themselves on the receiving end of a steady, unblinking stare. The elevator dinged. Trent stepped out, face pale, jaw tight. He didn't look at Ethan as he crossed the lobby. He didn't look at Lorraine. He didn't look at the cake smeared across the floor like a discarded childhood. He walked straight to the concierge desk, plucked the name badge off his blazer, and set it down. Then he turned around and faced the room. "Mrs. Miller," he said, forcing a smile that cracked at the edges. "It appears there's been a misunderstanding. The ownership group has decided to reinstate you pending investigation. You'll, of course, keep your position while we review the tapes." Lorraine blinked. She was used to being ignored. She wasn't used to people backtracking over her. Ethan watched Trent's throat work. He knew that tone. He'd heard men use it at tribunals. He'd heard it in interrogation tents. It was the sound of someone trying to build a new story on top of fresh wreckage. Trent opened his mouth to say something else. The front doors banged open again. The man who strode in didn't fit the typical Azure Palms resident profile. He was in his late 60s, the beginnings of a paunch beneath an expensive but slightly rumpled shirt. His hair was more salt than pepper, combed straight back, and he wore glasses with thin black frames. His tan wasn't spray-on. It came from a lifetime of sun. His presence hit the room like the first gust of wind before a storm. "Where is she?" he demanded, scanning the lobby. "Mr. Navarro," Trent began, pasting on his best PR smile. "I was just about to—" Mr. Navarro walked right past him. He came to a stop in front of Lorraine's bench. His gaze softened when it landed on her. "Lorraine," he said, voice dropping. "Are you hurt?" She blinked up at him. "Mr. Navarro, I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't," he said. "I watched it, every second, from the street cam and the lobby feed." He turned his head slowly, fixing Trent with a look that could have peeled paint. "You pulled the card out from under her?" Trent's tongue tripped over excuses. "It was a misunderstanding, sir. I was trying to prevent—" "You laughed," Navarro cut in. "You watched her fall and you laughed. Then you had the gall to call her son-in-law and imply she was staging it." Whispers rippled through the lobby. Some of the faces who'd tried not to look at the scene earlier were very much looking now. Navarro didn't take his eyes off the manager. "Pack up your office," he said. "You're done here." Trent's mouth opened and closed, a fish gasping in air-conditioned water. "You can't—" "I can," Navarro said. "I own the building, Trent. I sign your paychecks, and I won't have someone who thinks humiliating my staff on camera is good management. Consider this your termination notice, effective immediately." He snapped his fingers at Luis. "Escort Mr. Harlow to the back. Make sure he takes nothing except what belongs to him. And Luis," his tone softened just a fraction, "if you ever see someone fall in my lobby again, you call 911 before you look at me. Understood?" Luis swallowed. "Yes, sir." He turned, motioning stiffly for Trent to follow. The former manager sputtered, but he saw the cameras, the witnesses, the owner's face. He saw the German shepherd watching him, head tilted slightly like a judge considering options. He went. The doors to the service hall swung shut behind them. The lobby slowly exhaled. The paramedics came. They ran through their own checklist, different from Ethan's, but with overlapping concern. They measured blood pressure, checked no obvious fractures, cleaned the cut on Lorraine's head, and recommended a CT scan, just to be safe. Lorraine protested that she had to finish her shift. Navarro overruled her by putting a hand on her shoulder. "Take the rest of the day," he said. "Paid." She stared at him like he'd offered her the moon. "Mr. Cole," Navarro said, turning to Ethan, "I saw you intervene. I owe you a thank you. Ethan shook his head. You don't, he said. You owe her. He nodded toward Lorraine. She's been keeping your building clean long before I parked my truck across the street. Navarro's eyes narrowed, studying him. You military? He asked. Was, Ethan said. U.S. Navy, Special Operations. Navarro's gaze dropped briefly to the tattoos peeking out from under Ethan's sleeves. Barely visible banding, unit insignias that meant nothing to civilians, but everything to men who'd been there. Thought so, Navarro murmured. My brother was Marine Recon, didn't come home. He inhaled once, sharp. We'll talk later. Right now, I'm following this ambulance. He turned back to Lorraine. Your son-in-law is on his way, but I'm riding with you, he said. You're not sitting in the ER alone. Lorraine shook her head weakly. I'm fine, Mr. Navarro. Really? That's not up for debate, he said. I wasn't watching the feeds like I should have been. That's on me. The least I can do is hold your purse while they poke you with needles. She laughed at that, a thin, watery sound. Ethan watched them go, Rex at his heel. He could have left it there. The bad guy fired, the victim taken care of. Ownership chastened, cameras rolling, internet justice on its way. Story over. Except, when Lorraine had reached for the cake box earlier, something around her neck had swung out from under her polo, a small round metal disc on a simple chain. Ethan had recognized the shape without seeing the details. A military challenge coin. Most people worn them in pockets, not on chains, and most challenge coins didn't get that many scratches unless someone had thumbed them in the dark for decades. The image tugged at something in his memory. A name in a casualty list. A story he'd heard in a chow tent at 3 a.m. He whistled softly to Rex. Come on, buddy, he said. We're not done. The fluorescent lights in the emergency room hummed like angry bees. Lorraine sat on the edge of the gurney, hospital bracelet around her wrist. A thin blanket spread over her lap, even though the room was warm. The CT scan had come back clear. No bleeding, no fracture, just a nasty bump and instructions to take it easy and watch for dizziness. Can't take it much easier than scrubbing toilets one floor at a time, she'd muttered, which made the nurse hide a smile. Mr. Navarro had been called away to deal with a burst pipe on the 5th floor of another building he owned. He'd left after making sure Lorraine's daughter was on her way. The door opened. Ethan stepped in, hat in his hands. Rex stayed in the hall for now, lying politely where the nurse had pointed and charming every passing kid. Lorraine blinked. Oh, Mr. Cole, he supplied. Ethan Cole. He lifted the hat slightly in a gesture that was half greeting, half apology. Sorry to bother you. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. I'll live, she said. Doc says I've got a hard head. My kids could have told him that for free. He smiled. I also wanted to ask you about something, he said. If that's all right. She hesitated. Her whole life, people spoke to her when they needed something. A room cleaned, a spill mopped, a smell fixed. Not when they wanted to know something about her. Depends what it is, she said. He pointed gently at the chain around her neck, where the round coin now lay flat against her chest, half hidden by fabric. That, he said. I recognize the shape. Challenge coin, right? Her fingers went to it instinctively, closing around the metal disc. Yeah, she said, thumb rubbing over worn grooves. Belonged to my son. Army, Marines, Ethan asked softly. Army, she said. 101st Airborne, Special Operations Support, they called it. A faint smile ghosted across her lips. He said as long as they kept changing the words, he'd keep doing the work. Name? Ethan asked, a careful kind of question. Staff Sergeant Michael Miller, she said. Everyone called him Mike. Her eyes went distant for a second. He shipped out a brag when he was 22. That was 15 years ago now. Ethan inhaled, something cold and familiar sliding into his stomach. What year? He asked. 09, she said. Afghanistan, Kunar Province. His captain came to my door with 2 men in dress uniforms. I knew before they even said the words. They gave me the flag, the folded. One, they gave me the medals. They said he saved some other boys with wives and kids. She swallowed. They told me his name would be on a wall somewhere, she added, and that I should be proud, and I am. She shook her head, laughing without humor. Pride doesn't pay for window air conditioners or cake mix, she said. So I went back to work. Ethan's chest tightened. Kunar. Oh, 09. He had been there. Not in Mike's exact unit. Not on that particular patrol. But he'd heard the story. Convoy hit on a goat track. One vehicle disabled, one teetering on the edge. Enemy fire from the tree line. One NCO who'd run toward the burning truck while everyone else dove for cover. Pulled 2 men out. Went back for the third. Didn't come back. For days afterward, guys passed around a photocopied picture. Mike Miller grinning in a ball cap, one arm around a dog that looked a lot like Rex, the other holding up a fishing pole with a stupidly small trout. The coin Lorraine was holding, Ethan had seen its twin. In a bar in Fayetteville, under the shadow of 3 empty beer bottles, with a corporal who'd said, Miller wouldn't want us moping. He'd want us to drink cheap beer and make bad decisions. Ethan sat down on the visitor's chair slowly. He saved one of mine, he said. Lorraine's head snapped up. One of your what? One of my men, Ethan said. We rotated through that valley the year after he died. I was SEAL team, attached to an Army unit. Our comms guy, Dawson, was only alive because a staff sergeant named Miller dragged him out of a fire and shoved him into a ditch. They called in air because he kept talking, even with shrapnel in his leg. Nobody on our side ever forgot that name. He nodded at the coin. I didn't know he had a mom cleaning lobbies in Clearwater, he said. If I had, I'd have been at your door a long time ago. Lorraine's fingers tightened around the coin. Tears filled her eyes, hot and sudden. They said his sacrifice mattered, she whispered. You read those words on fancy paper, but it's hard to feel it, you know, when you're arguing with a landlord about fixing the mold. I know, Ethan said, and I also know this. Your son kept his men alive. A lot of us walked out of that valley because someone like him refused to stay behind sandbags. He leaned forward. So, I'm telling you now, he said. It mattered. He mattered. And what happened to you today? It's not going to be the last chapter anyone writes about your family. He meant it as a promise. He didn't realize yet how literal that promise would become. 2 days later, Ethan stood in Lorraine's living room and thought, if hell had a humidity setting, this would be it. Her apartment was on the edge of town, in a squat 3-story complex that had been luxury in the 80s, and then politely forgotten. The stucco outside was cracked, the mailboxes dented. The stairwell smelled faintly of old cigarettes and bleach. Inside, Lorraine had carved out a kind of dignity. The thrift store couch had a crochet blanket draped over it. The coffee table was scarred but clean. Framed photos lined the walls, a young man in a high school football jersey, the same young man in dress greens, a little girl with missing teeth holding up a fishing pole. The coin from the hospital now sat in a small shadow box on a shelf, next to a folded flag encased in glass. The air, however, was awful. The window AC unit in the living room was dead. A corpse with rust stains like tears down the wall. A cheap box fan wheezed in the corner, pushing hot air around instead of cooling it. Yeah, Ethan said, wiping sweat from his neck. This isn't safe. I've had worse, Lorraine said from the kitchen doorway. She was in a cotton house dress now, hair in a looser bun. In '87, the AC went out for a whole week and I had 2 kids and 3 fans that sounded like tractors. We survived. You were 20 years younger, Ethan said, and the summers weren't this vicious. She snorted. You sound like my doctor. Your doctor's right, Ethan replied. Rex lay sprawled on the tile, tongue lolling slightly as he panted. Even he looked unimpressed with the conditions. Ethan had come by under the pretense of bringing groceries. He'd shown up with 2 bags full of basics and a third with nothing but Gatorade and ice cream for Maddie. But the moment he stepped inside, the mission had shifted. You tell your landlord about the AC? He asked. 3 times, she said. He says he's working on it, which I think means he's hoping I die before he has to spend the money. She said it lightly, as if joking, but her eyes flicked toward the shadow box on the shelf, like she was measuring odds. Ethan walked to the window, tried to lift it. It was painted shut, the wood swollen, layers of cheap white gloss sealing it like a tomb. He checked his watch. His flight out of Tampa to Norfolk was in 12 hours. Report date for the new training assignment was in 48. He could hop a plane, shake a few hands, sit in briefings, and pretend this apartment didn't exist. He could tell himself he'd done enough, He'd stopped the public cruelty. He'd spoken Mike's name out loud. He'd brought groceries, but he looked at the shadow box again, at the folded flag, at the coin, at the framed photo of a younger Lorraine standing in front of a little brick house with Mike's arms slung around her shoulders. He thought about Mike running into fire for Dawson. He thought about a hand slapping an old woman's fingers away from a candle. "Rex," he said quietly, more to himself than the dog, "we're not leaving this like it is." Rex thumped his tail once. Ethan pulled his phone from his pocket. He didn't call the landlord. He called an old number he hadn't dialed in months. "Cole?" a rough voice answered on the second ring. "You finally remembered how phones work?" "Afternoon to you too, Sarge," Ethan said. "You busy?" "Depends," said the voice. "If you're calling to ask how my golf game is, I'm hanging up. Got a Gold Star mom in Clearwater whose AC is shot and whose landlord is a cheap bastard," Ethan said. Her boy was Mike Miller, Kunar. 009. There was a crackle on the line as the other man shifted. "Mike's mom?" he said, the disbelief raw. "You're with her?" "Standing in her oven of a living room right now," Ethan replied. "I'm wheels up in 12 hours. I can't stick around to fight with the building manager. I need you to assemble some righteous trouble." On the other end, retired Master Sergeant Ray Dawson said a word that made Lorraine, overhearing half the conversation, raise her eyebrows. "I owe that kid my life," Dawson said. "You know I do." "I know," Ethan said. "So I figured you might know a few people." Dawson chuckled, humorless. "Couple," he said. "Half the guys from the old platoon work construction now. One runs HVAC, another's doing electrical. We've got a lawyer who likes suing landlords, and I happen to run a little nonprofit that exists for exactly this kind of problem." Ethan smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." "Text me the address," Dawson said. "Tell Mrs. Miller not to sign any more leases until we get there. And Cole?" "Yeah?" "You tell her there's a whole lot of men walking around this country because of her boy," Dawson said quietly. "We've been looking for a way to pay that forward. Looks like we found one." And the next 24 hours were a controlled storm. They started small. Dawson showed up the next morning in a dusty blue pickup with Forward March Foundation, magnetized on the side, and a logo of a boot print turning into a house. He was taller than Ethan remembered, or maybe it was just the way he filled the doorway. Barrel-chested, thick-bearded, eyes still razor-sharp despite the crow's feet. He hugged Lorraine like she was family he'd just found again. "Ma'am," he said, stepping back, voice rough. "My name's Ray Dawson. Your boy pulled me out of a burning Humvee so I could be here annoying you in your kitchen." Lorraine swatted at tears with the back of her hand. "Then get in this kitchen and take a seat," she said. "If men are going to crash my apartment with tool belts, they're not doing it on empty stomachs." Behind Dawson came the others. Marcus with tattoos crawling up both arms, lugging a brand new window unit on his shoulder like it weighed nothing. Torres, wiry and grinning, carrying a toolbox that looked like it belonged in a war zone rather than a condominium. A young guy named Ben, who had never met Mike but had heard the story so many times he felt like he had. They moved with purpose. One team cracked open the painted shut windows, prying them loose, scraping away layers of old gloss. Another ripped out the dead AC unit and installed a sleek, efficient model that hummed to life with a stream of cool air that made Lorraine close her eyes and sigh like a woman tasting rain after a drought. Torres found the mold behind the bathroom cabinet. Ben found the frayed wire in the living room outlet that could have started a fire. Dawson took pictures of everything. "Landlord's gonna love this," he muttered, snapping a close-up of the exposed wiring. Lorraine hovered, torn between wanting to help and not wanting to be in the way. Rex followed her faithfully, accepting chair scratches and sneaking glances at the men on ladders. Around noon, there was a knock on the door. Ethan opened it to find Mr. Navarro in the hallway, holding a stack of folders and looking slightly out of place among the tool bags and extension cords. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said. "Come on in," Ethan said. "Watch your step. We're doing a little renovation." "I can see that," Navarro said, eyes taking in the new vents, the open windows, the men in Forward March shirts. "I stopped by to bring this." He set the folders on the table. They had the Azure Palms logo on the corner. "Lorraine, this is your employment file," he said. "Your reviews for the last 12 years, all stellar by the way. And this," he pulled out a single sheet, "is your new contract. We're formally promoting you to senior housekeeping supervisor. increased pay, better hours, benefits. Lorraine stared. I don't have a car to drive to your other buildings, she said automatically, brain tripping over practical details. You won't need to, Navarro said. Your job is at Azure Palms, training new staff, making sure nobody shortcuts like Trent did. If you're up for it. Lorraine looked around at the men on ladders, at Ethan, at Rex. I'm up for it, she said, and there was steel in the words. Good, Navarro said, because I also brought something else. He reached into his messenger bag, pulled out an envelope. This is from the board, he said. It's not charity. It's back pay we owe you for years of overlooked overtime. And a little extra from me, personally, for not paying closer attention to what was happening in my lobby. Ethan could tell from the thickness of the envelope that it wasn't just a token gesture. Lorraine's hands shook as she took it. I don't, she began. Your son bought a lot of people time, Navarro said gently. We can't repay that. We can only choose how we spend the time we got. For me, that means making sure his mom doesn't have to climb 3 flights of stairs to a broken AC unit ever again. He looked at Dawson's men. If you ever need a project, he said, I've got a few other buildings with tenants who could use some of this attention. Dawson grinned. We'll add you to the list, he said. Band, air, be starring in the starst. Ethan almost missed his flight. Not because he lost track of time, old habits again, but because leaving felt like walking away from a mission halfway through. The apartment looked different now. New AC humming, windows that slid up with only a little effort, mold cut out and replaced, outlet plates straight and clean. The air smelled like fresh paint and lemon oil instead of damp drywall. Lorraine looked different too. The fatigue was still there, the years still drawn around her eyes, but there was a light under her skin that hadn't been there in the lobby. A straightness in her shoulders, a sense that the world had tilted just a little in her favor for once. Maddie's photo had a new neighbor on the shelf, a frame picture Ethan had printed at the drugstore on the corner, of Lorraine sitting on the gurney in the ER, laughing at something Rex had done. He'd caught the moment when she forgot there was a hospital bracelet on her wrist. Dawson's crew had left an hour earlier, promising to swing by with a handyman schedule and a lawyer's card. Navarro had gone back to his world of board meetings and profit margins, but something in his steps suggested those meetings might sound different now. It was just Ethan, Lorraine, and Rex in the apartment. His duffel sat by the door. His hat was in his hands again. You sure you don't want to stay for supper? Lorraine asked, even though the clock said there was no way. I make a mean meatloaf when the oven doesn't turn the place into a sauna. If I miss this flight, the Navy will send someone less charming to drag me back, Ethan said. Trust me, you want to avoid that. She chuckled. Fine, she said, but you promise you'll come back. I'm not done embarrassing you with stories about young men who thought they knew everything. I'll come back, Ethan said. Might drag a few of those young men with me. He moved toward the door, then stopped. Lorraine watched him, fingers worrying the hem of her dress. Ethan, she said softly. He turned. She reached into the pocket of her dress. He expected the coin, the one in the shadow box, the one he'd told himself he'd refuse, no matter how many times she tried. She didn't take it out. Instead, she pulled out a small metal object on a chain. It was old brass, worn to a soft sheen by years of touch. About the size of a silver dollar, but thinner, with a scratched glass window in the middle. The compass needle inside still swung true, quivering for a second before settling on north. Mike carried this when he was a kid, she said. Ran around the backyard pretending he was on some expedition. When he joined the army, he took it with him, said it reminded him there was always a way home, as long as you knew where you were. She stepped closer, holding it up between them. When they sent his things back, this was in the box, she said. I've kept it for years, but lately it's just been sitting on the shelf, pointing north at the drywall. She took a breath. That's not what it was for, she said. It was for getting lost boys back where they belong. She reached up, fingers trembling only slightly, and slipped the chain over Ethan's head. The compass settled against his chest, cool through the cotton of his shirt. Ma'am, he said, voice rougher than he liked. I can't. You can, she said firmly. You will. My son gave his life so men like you could come home. I'm not about to let some linen suit in a lobby be the last thing you remember when you walk into the dark again. Her eyes shone, but her jaw was set. I order you, she said, and the words landed with all the authority of a Gold Star mother handing down divine instructions. To come back, you hear me, Ethan Cole? Something in his chest that had been drifting for a long time found a fixed point. Yes, ma'am, he said, loud and clear. She patted his chest where the compass lay. Good, she said, because I want to be around to see Maddie graduate, and I figure a man who can make building owners fire bad managers is a handy person to keep in the family. He laughed, shaking his head. Rex nudged her hand, then bumped his head against Ethan's hip, sensing the shift. He chuffed once, soft, the dog version of time to move. Ethan picked up his duffel. They walked to the door together. On the landing, the heat wrapped around them again, but it felt different. Less like a threat, more like weather. At the bottom of the stairs, a cab waited with the trunk already open. Dawson leaned against the hood of his truck across the lot, arms folded, watching with an expression that said, I'll keep watch, without needing the words. Ethan turned back to Lorraine. He didn't salute. That was for uniforms and ceremonies. This wasn't that. Instead, he stepped forward and carefully, gently, wrapped her in a hug. It surprised them both. She smelled like laundry soap and coffee, and something that could only be called home. For a second, he wasn't in a Florida parking lot. He was in some imagined kitchen where a woman like this had waited at a table with a pot roast for a son who never made it back. He stepped away before the moment stretched too long. You call Dawson if the landlord so much as breathes wrong, he said. You call me if you need anything bigger than a toaster lifted. I don't have your number, she pointed out. He smiled. Dawson does, he said, and he's worse than a mother hen when it comes to keeping track of people who owe him beers. You won't lose me that easy. He and Rex climbed into the cab. As the driver pulled away, Ethan turned in his seat to look back. Lorraine stood on the walkway, one hand raised in a small wave, the other resting lightly over the pocket where the coin case sat. Behind her, he could see the faint outline of a new AC unit in the window. It hummed steadily, pushing cool air into a room that had been an oven 2 days ago. Dawson straightened, lifted 2 fingers from his brow in a half salute. Ethan returned it through the glass. The apartment complex shrank in the rear window. The road to the airport stretched ahead, lined with palms and billboards, and people who would never know what had just shifted in one small corner of their town. Ethan reached up and pressed his fingertips lightly against the compass under his shirt. It ticked against his chest with each bump in the road. Not loud, just enough to remind him it was there. Rex, he said. The dog lifted his head from where it rested on Ethan's thigh. Next mission, Ethan murmured, looking out at the hazy horizon. We bring this with us. No more wandering without a heading. Deal? Rex leaned closer, pressing his weight into Ethan's side. It wasn't an answer in words, but it didn't need to be. Somewhere behind them, a manager who thought power was a shield was packing cardboard boxes under the unblinking eye of legal notices. Somewhere above that, a condo board was rewriting policy. Somewhere further still, an old woman on a third-floor walk-up was sitting in front of a humming AC unit, feeling cool air on her face, and realizing she didn't have to be invisible anymore. Ethan sat back, letting the rhythm of the road settle into his bones. The war he was flying toward would have rules and briefings and maps. The one he'd just fought in a marble lobby had none of those things. But the mission was the same. Protect the vulnerable. Stand between cruelty and those who couldn't stand for themselves. And never ever forget the people who kept you alive long enough to have the chance. As the cab merged onto the highway, the compass needle spun once, then steadied, pointing north. Ethan smiled, eyes on the line where asphalt met sky. Roger that, he said softly to no one and everyone at once. I'm on my way.